Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, common denominators between the Timberwolves' best lineup so far this season, plus what are some of the biggest offensive issues the Wolves have struggled more on that end of the floor so far this season. What's to blame? Also, a preview of Wolves Suns and when can the Wolves get right over the next couple of weeks. It's all coming on the show here today. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are on national TV tonight. TNT game against the Phoenix Suns. We'll preview that at the end of the show today. Plenty to get to before that, though. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also find the show on the new Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All the Locked On Sports Minnesota shows, more great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku or Amazon Fire TV. You can also, of course, follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves or my account, which is at Beecken, and that's with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right. Wolves Suns tonight on the road in Phoenix, 9 p.m. Central tip on TNT. And I mean, it should be a ton of fun. The Suns are without DeAndre Ayton. We'll talk about this at the end of the show, but a big game tonight. The Wolves' first game against a team that was expected to be a playoff contender, although who knows at this point with like Utah and San Antonio. That's coming up tonight. We will do a live postcast this evening following the game. It will be late. Marnie will not be on the show tonight. Typically, Marnie Gellner from Bally Sports North is on the live postcast, but it's not a Bally game tonight. It's a TNT game. So I'll do the live postcast solo, 10, 12 minutes about the game. We'll do a full show for Wednesday as well. So you'll get a quick hitter abbreviated version late Tuesday night, and then you'll get the full podcast first thing Wednesday morning. So make sure you're following and subscribed. The live postcast, by the way, goes on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube feed live, and then it comes to this audio feed, Locked On Wolves. You can find it there after the fact. Apologies, I have a bit of a squeak in my voice today. I started to lose it earlier today. So hopefully it doesn't completely go out on me, and hopefully this, the late night on Tuesday doesn't kill my voice for the rest of the week. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's go ahead and talk some lineup data first. Today, I want to talk lineup data. I want to talk offensive issues. I want to talk, this year versus last year, the start of the season. We did this a bit last year when it felt like the sky was falling after the Spurs blowout on Monday night of last week. Last week. I said last year. Last week, we did this after the blowout lost to the Spurs. I want to do it again. A reminder. I'll start here, actually. This team started 4-9 last year. Let's not lose sight of that. There's this sky is falling mentality is easy to get there, right? Yes, this team is 4-3. I thought that at this point they'd be 5-2 or maybe even 6-1, given the competition they're playing against. But the Spurs have been far better than expected. The Spurs are now I believe 5-3 or 5-2 actually. The Jazz, I think, are still just a one-loss team. And OKC, actually, other than the Wolves beat OKC twice, but OKC went out and beat the Clippers a couple of times. They've beaten some other good teams. So all the teams the Wolves have played have actually been better than expected, right? So given that context, I mean, hey, a 4-3 start. Yeah, and also given how bad they played, especially offensively, and at times, like against the Spurs on Sunday, defensively as well. But they've been so bad offensively, and yet they're still 4-3. And they've played, other than the Lakers, mostly teams that have played well so far this season. One of the things I underestimated when I looked at the schedule to start the season for the Wolves is that they're playing teams that are expected to be in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, expected to be tanking. I'll use the word, expected to be tanking this season. But this early in the season, everyone's motivated, right? These young players are fighting for a rotation spot. They're fighting for somebody to give them a job permanently in the NBA, even if it's not their current team. They're not trying to lose. These coaches aren't trying to. I mean, Greg Popovich is a good coach, obviously. He's a great coach. The Jazz new coach is a brand new head coach. He's trying to win. OKC, the coaching staffs are not trying to lose for these teams. The players are not trying to lose. And in week 1, week 2, week 3 of the season, everybody's motivated to try their very best, right? The front offices haven't got involved as much, maybe a little bit here and there, but with resting guys, with trading guys, with sending guys to the G League or whatever it might be to try and manipulate results, which will, let's face it, that will happen eventually for many of these teams. But the Wolves have already played the Spurs 3 out of the 4 times they'll play them. They've lost twice. They played the Thunder 2 out of the 4 times they'll play them. They've won both of those games. But at this point in the season, these teams are not what they will be in February, March, April, when they're at that point actively going to be, the front offices at least will be actively trying to lose, and some of these guys may be beaten down and not trying as hard. I mean, again, that's kind of the dirty secret that nobody talks about, but some of these guys at that point in the season, they're ready to go home. But in October, they're all playing hard. And the Wolves are facing those teams now, which could be a detriment later in the year. It just means the schedule will be more difficult with these games gone this early in the schedule. You don't get to play the Spurs 3 more times later in the season. You just get to play them once. You only have 2 more games against the Thunder, and I think one's in December. So, that you get done with them early. They play Houston on Saturday. And Houston's continues to be one of the league's worst teams. I mean, that isn't a surprise. They've been bad as expected, whereas the Thunder, Spurs, Jazz have all surprised people with how decent they've all been, and in some cases actually good, like in Utah's case. So that in the long run may be a good thing. I think we should factor that into our evaluation, though. These are all teams that knew that they weren't expected to be good, but those guys are all playing hard. The Wolves are kind of the flip of that. Everyone thought the Wolves would be good. And I think the Wolves said, okay, we'll roll over these teams. We'll go 6-1, like I thought would happen over the first 7. And instead, they were rudely awakened to a 4-3 record in the first 7. And now you play at Phoenix, you play Milwaukee on Friday, and a back-to-back Friday, Saturday. Things aren't going to be handed to you if you're the Timberwolves, and they haven't been. And, in hindsight, facing some of these tanking teams or teams that eventually will be tanking may have been nice. It may have been nice to have them on the schedule later in the season. And now they're kind of out of the way. And my theory had been, you can play some of these lesser teams now to get prepared for I was hoping if you could be 6-1 or 5-2 going into the Phoenix game, that would be great. Well, and maybe you're prepared to play the Suns. Well, I mean, we'll see. Maybe some of these struggles have prepared them to play better against a DeAndre Ayton-less Phoenix team on Tuesday and the Bucks on Friday. And maybe they will be in a better spot. But sitting here right now, it doesn't feel great. The theory of getting right against bad teams just hasn't worked out. And part of that, by the way, is because some of these issues are fixable things that shouldn't have been issues in the first place, like effort, like I mentioned a minute ago, thinking you're going to roll over some of these teams because clearly that's happening. So these are all fixable issues, which is encouraging on the one hand, but on the other hand, if they just tried hard, right? If they had played as hard as some of these other younger, hungrier teams over the first 7 of the Timberwolves season, they probably do come out of this at least 5-2, if not 6-1, right? Now, still, the team is also working through kinks offensively. They've been trying some different things on defense to try and adjust to a lack of really, solid on-ball pressure on the perimeter. We'll see if some of those things will help them come to play against Phoenix and Milwaukee and others this week. But again, in the long run, perhaps this is a good thing. It doesn't feel good right now when the team is expected to be much better over the first 7 of the season than they have been in actuality. So, all right, next I want to get into that some of that lineup data I mentioned. I want to talk a little bit about some of the offensive issues to this point in the season. First, though, let's talk about our title sponsors of today's show, and that is, of course, our friends over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's extremely easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn. You post the job, and then you add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. We just had Halloween. It's November now. We're the last 2 months of the calendar year. It's time to finish the year strong. You can find the absolute right team member for you And the best way to do that is LinkedIn Jobs. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's talk lineup data. So before, I guess it would have been late last week, actually before the Lakers win on Friday, before the Spurs lost Sunday, we talked about net rating and how Jordan McLaughlin was like the net rating king for the Wolves. Nas Reed was very good. And McLaughlin hasn't played since then. He didn't play against the Lakers. He didn't play on Sunday. And the word on Monday is that he's improving he's got a shot to play against Phoenix on Tuesday, which would be huge. This is really interesting. And I don't, like again, we're talking about 7 games worth of data, but if you look at the 2-man lineups on NBA.com/stats, um, the 2-man lineups bear this out in terms of net rating. And again, like all we could draw from this is how good these guys have been through 7 games. It doesn't necessarily mean this will be the case after the next 7 games or it'll be the case in January. But we're working off the data that we have for this season and also what we know of these guys from last year. And sitting here right now, the data tells us that of the top 7 2-man lineups, so the top 7 pairings on the Timberwolves according to net rating, all have either Jordan McLaughlin or Nas Reed as part of the pairing. Now, some of them, like for instance, McLaughlin and Nate Knight have played 1 minute together, so that you can throw that one out. Kyle Anderson, Nas Reed have played 3 minutes together, but everybody else is double-digit minutes together. I guess Bryn Forbes and Jordan McLaughlin's only 9 minutes. So if you want to throw those out, you can. But no matter how you slice it, the top 7 all have either McLaughlin or Nas Reed, and 11 of the top 12, same thing. The only exception, if you're wondering, in the top 12 is the Kyle Anderson Rudy Gobert duo. Interestingly, is a plus 32.9. Now they've only played 15 minutes together because Kyle Anderson's only appeared in 3 games to this point. But every other, like McLaughlin and Noel, they have a net rating of plus 37.1 in 62 minutes, which is incredible. And if you look at just like 2-man pairings on the team, period, I mean, that's in the top. Like, obviously, there's the starters. It's like probably like the 12th or 14th most used pairing is Noel and McLaughlin together. Played 62 minutes together. It is a crazy 37.1. Like, if you sort by minutes, the only pairing that's played more minutes that's in the same neighborhood is Jalen Noel and Anthony Edwards, which is really interesting because typically that's with Ant at the 3 and Noel at the 2. But we've also seen Noel play at the 1 and Edwards play at the 2 together. And they have a plus 25 net rating in 67 minutes, which is really fascinating. But at any rate, McLaughlin and Nas Reed are the net rating stars. That comes through in these 2-man pairings. And it'll be interesting to see how much longer that lasts. Marnie Gellner and I talked about this on the postcast following the loss on Sunday. But I think the follow-up here is how does Jordan McLaughlin's path to minutes is easy. If he's healthy, he's the backup point guard. He's the change of pace when D'Lo's not having a great D'Lo game, right? There's good D'Lo, there's bad D'Lo. If it's a bad D'Lo game, Jordan McLaughlin's kind of the break glass in case of emergency. Like, he's going to play minutes regardless, but he's going to play more, like we saw him play in crunch time of Game 6 last year in the playoffs. That's McLaughlin's role. Nas Reed's path to minutes are a lot murkier, right? He has had a couple of DNP CDs. He's just not played, including against the Lakers on Friday. He only played, I think, 9 minutes on Sunday against the Spurs and was fantastic. Was a plus 12 in just straight individual plus minus in the box score. And the Wolves were better with him on the floor than they were with Towns and Gobert on the floor on Sunday. They just were. I'm not at all saying that's going to be the case night in and night out. But to this point in the season, like, it's hard to justify not giving Nas Reed minutes. So the question is, where do those minutes come from? How creative does Chris Finch get? I mean, are the Wolves just going to play massive all the time and always have 2 of Nas Reed, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert on the floor? Just always have massive lineups with either Cat at the 5 and Nas at the 4, Rudy at the 5, Cat at the 4, Rudy at the 5, Nas at the 4. All those combinations. I mean, like, is that just what they're going to do? Or does it eat into Kyle Anderson's minutes now that he's getting healthier? The Wolves could ease him back into action. It could trickle down further, right? I mean, Jaden McDaniels could play the 3. It could eat into Torian Prince's minutes. It could eat into, you know, I think most likely is we see less of Bryn Forbes, maybe even less of Jalen Noel if he plays, certainly like if he plays like he did Sunday, and just play bigger lineups in general. Like, why not just lean into the whole thing and find Nas some minutes there, play Kyle Anderson at the 3, play Torian Prince at the 3, and Nas becomes like your primary backup 4. I think that's entirely possible. There could be this trickle down effect where the smaller players just generally get less minutes. That's a way that Chris Finch could kind of, navigate this. So don't be shocked if that's the case. Another interesting thing, and this is shifting gears a little bit, but talking about the offensive issues, to this point in the season, the Wolves are 22nd in the NBA in free throw rate. They're 23rd in 3-point attempt rate. Last season, they finished the year 10th in free throw rate and 3rd in 3-point attempt rate. And by the way, they were 1st in 3-point attempts per game, just the straight per game number. But remember, they use so many possessions, they play at such a fast pace that the rate is what, that's why the rate finished 3rd, even though the attempts per game were actually 1st. So they finished 10th in free throw rate last year. They're currently 22nd. That's the frequency with which they shoot free throws on the offensive end of the floor. They finished 3rd in 3-point rate last season league-wide. They're 23rd so far this year. Chris Finch wants to play. Remember, he comes from, go all the way back, the Houston Rockets tree. He was the head coach at Rio Grande Valley when they did all the experimentation with only shooting threes and in the paint, like exclusively. That's how Chris Finch would like to play. Not quite to that extreme. And he's got guys that are good for mid-range. Speaking of good for mid-range, we'll talk about the Suns next segment. That team is great for mid-range. But Karl-Anthony Towns is a great mid-range shooter. D'Angelo Russell is a very good mid-range shooter. Jalen Noel is a very good mid-range shooter. The Wolves just don't scheme up those shots. They get them when D'Lo shoots out a turn or, forces a shot up. They get them when Ant dribbles into a tougher shot than he, should. So if the Wolves are, and they're not necessarily taking that many more mid-range twos, by the way, I should point that out. They're getting to the rim a bit more, but they're also shooting a lot more in the 3 to 10 foot range. If you look at Towns' shot breakdown, he's shooting a lot more like floaters and hooks from the 3 to 10 foot range than he typically did last year. And he's shooting less within 3 feet of the rim. So less at the basket, more in the paint. And generally that's going to be a less efficient shot, obviously, right? If you're further from the rim, it's going to be a tougher shot to make. And if you're between 3 and 10 feet, you're very, very seldom going to actually have an open shot from there, right? It's going to be contested on some level. So the Wolves are making things harder on themselves by the shot selection, and they're just not drawing fouls. We talked about Ant on Sunday. If I recall correctly, he had he had 3 free throw attempts on like 15 2-pointers, which is just nuts. Yes, part of it is the whistle. Like, he doesn't get the whistle still like he should, but he's been going Euro step, more of the layup package than actually dunk. He hasn't actually completed a dunk this year. He's tried to throw it on people and he's gotten fouled. He hasn't dunked the ball yet, which is crazy, through 7 games. If you look on Basketball Reference, they keep track of dunks. He has 0 dunks through 7 games so far this season. So the Wolves need to get more aggressive getting to the basket. They need to let it fly from 3, and it's got to be more than Ant step backs. They've just got to, and part of that is a function of a lack of ball movement. We've talked about this a lot. Marnie and I have talked about this a ton on the live postcast. It has become a my turn, your turn offense all too often. And when that's the case, you're either not getting threes or you're getting tough step back contested threes. If the Wolves are running offense and getting flow and the ball's moving from side to side, you're going to naturally get more threes by swinging the ball around the perimeter, by driving and kicking. Ant, for instance, in the first quarter against the Lakers, when he dropped whatever it was in the first quarter, what did he have? 15 and 4 assists in the first quarter. He got open 3-pointers for Jaden McDaniels, among others, but a couple for J-Mac simply by driving and kicking. A very simple basketball play. And that didn't happen against the Spurs on Sunday. We've too often seen that not actually, things not go down that way so far this season. But the bottom, 8 ranking in both free throw rate and 3-point rate to this point is concerning for the Wolves. Those are categories that they simply have to improve in. And by the way, in general, offensively, they're like, I think it was 16th or 18th in terms of offensive rating, and defensively, they're 6th. As much as I complained about their defense Sunday because it wasn't good against the Spurs, they've been good overall this season. I mean, Rudy Gobert in the walking top 10 defense, at least through 7 games, that's been a thing. The offense has just been stuck in the mud, and it's got to get figured out. Okay. Can that happen against the Suns? Maybe. Let's talk about what the Suns have been up to, what they've done so far this season, what we can expect to see out of the Phoenix Suns on Tuesday night. All right, the Timberwolves take on the Phoenix Suns in Phoenix in the desert on Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Central Tip, and it is on TNT, the Timberwolves' first true nationally televised game this season. They run NBA TV on Sunday, but it's a TNT game on Tuesday night. The Suns are 5-1 so far this season. They're 4-0 at home and have been, frankly, they've been dominant all season. Every single one of their 5 wins have been double-digit wins, except for their season opener against the Dallas Mavericks, who are obviously a good team. And the only loss was on the road to Portland by 2. And Portland won their first, I think, 4 or 5 games of the season before Damian Lillard got hurt. So Portland has been good so far this year. Dallas has been good. Phoenix has won every one of their games by 2 points except for one, and their only loss came by 2 points on the road. Undefeated at home. Now, DeAndre Ayton's out. I think it's ankle sprain. That's helpful, obviously, for Minnesota. But to this point this season, and Ayton played in their first 4 games. They played 6 total. So overall this season through 6 games, Phoenix is number 1 in offensive rating. They're number 4 in defensive rating. And that they were one of just a couple of teams last year to be in the top 5 in both categories. And their offense is really strange in terms of how they get their points. They're 26th in pace, which, they were a little bit faster last year. I think they were like, 16th or 17th in pace. They're like middle of the pack in pace. This year, they're 26th in pace, which is the number of possessions. I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's how fast you play, how many possessions you get on offense. But they're also 19th in free throw rate. I was just complaining about the Wolves being 22nd in free throw rate. They're 24th in three-point attempt rate. That's not too dissimilar from last year when the Phoenix was still an extremely good offense. What they finished last year, they were their offensive rating last season was 4th in the league. So they finished 4th in offensive rating, 3rd in defensive rating. They finished 4th in offensive rating last year while being 29th in free throw rate and 27th in three-point attempt rate. Bottom 2 in free throw rate, bottom 4 in three-point attempt rate last season, and yet they were the 4th best offense in the year of our Lord 2021-22, NBA season of our Lord 21-22, however you want to say it. Which is just, it boggles the mind. Now, obviously, this team is made up of mid-range assassins, which is, I like to refer to myself as that when I play pickup basketball. And the range isn't maybe what it should be. Mid-range assassin, I would fit in with the Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul, last year, more than a third of his shot attempts came from 10 to 16 feet, which is the true mid-range, right? 10 to 16 feet, not the super inefficient long mid-range, but anything around the elbows, the neighborhood of the elbows, right? Chris Paul last year shot 59.2% from 10 to 16 feet, according to Basketball Reference, which is absolutely insane. 59%. Devin Booker shot more than a fifth of his attempts last year from that same range, 22.4% to be precise. And he was 46.9%, which is still very, very good. So Chris Paul, a third of his attempts, more than a third of his attempts, 59% from mid-range last season. Booker, 22% of his shots at 47%. Now, this year, also last year, by the way, Chris Paul, so he shot a third of his attempts from 10 to 16 feet. He shot 19%, so nearly a fifth of his attempts from 16 feet to three-point range at 48.2%. Booker was 17% of his shots from that range at 47%. So that's a lot of numbers. But Chris Paul and Devin Booker are both absolute mid-range assassins, and Chris Paul especially. Overall, they're shooting the ball a little bit less from that range so far through 6 games this season. But last year, they were both just off the charts in terms of number of shots from mid-range and their efficiency for mid-range. Pick and roll, obviously, when Ayton's healthy, the Chris Paul or Devin Booker with DeAndre Ayton pick and roll is basically unstoppable. They have athletes to run fast. They've got Bridges, who's really good at the rim. But for the most part, this team just dominates from mid-range. It's a recipe for disaster against a team that likes to play drop coverage, and the Wolves like to do that with Rudy Gobert. They've even been doing it with Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5. So I'm a bit dubious for how this is going to work out for the Wolves. They've been really good at not defending without fouling this year, but the Suns don't care. They're not getting to the line a ton. The Wolves have been okay at defending the three-point line, certainly not including the Spurs game on Sunday. The Suns don't care. They don't shoot that many threes. if you're going to give them the mid-range, if you're going to give them 14, 16 feet all night long, they're going to take it all night long. And they're going to make 55, 60% of those shots if you can't get them contested. And if D'Lo can't provide ball pressure, and if Jalen Noel can't provide ball pressure, and if Anthony Edwards isn't consistent with his ball pressure, and you don't get out and run against this team, you're going to lose. Now, I think the Wolves will try and speed it up. Chris Finch always wants to speed it up. I talked about this on Monday's show and on the postcast following Sunday's debacle. This team has to play fast. D'Angelo Russell did not play fast enough Sunday. He did not push the pace enough. He wasn't the only one, but he's supposed to be the straw that stirs the drink, and he did not hold up his end of the bargain. You can bet Chris Finch is stressing this. This is a team that was 26th in pace this season. Last season, they played a little faster. They finished, they were actually 9th in pace. I was wrong earlier. I thought they were in the teens. They were 9th in pace last season. But this is a team that so far this season has been more than happy to operate relatively slowly and not push the pace. The Wolves have to push the pace. They have to get more possessions if they're going to beat the Suns. This is a tough matchup for the Wolves. Now they have the size advantage, obviously, with no DeAndre Ayton, and there's not a whole lot of other like size that really scares you in the Spurs lineup. Frankly, they've got some guys that are decent. You've got Jock Landale coming off the bench, who's had a good season to this point. And is an option for them. Dario Saric, former Timberwolf, hasn't actually played much at all for them coming back from the ACL injury. Bismack Biyombo is likely going to start at center. He's the Wolves are very familiar with him as an NBA player. You don't worry about him offensively, but he can help control the paint. It's an interesting roster. And I just, it's not a great matchup for Minnesota. It just isn't. I don't have the line in front of me, but my guess is that the Wolves are probably underdogs by, 6-7 points in this one would be my guess. But at any rate, the recipe to win is to mix up some coverages, not strictly play drop pick and roll coverage. I wonder if they'll mix in some zone and try and force the Suns into shooting some threes. They've got guys that can make threes, obviously, but I think you'd rather them force threes than be really comfortable in the mid-range. So don't be shocked if the Wolves did that. For instance, last time out, Chris Paul and Devin Booker combined to shoot 1 of 11 from threes in their win against Houston on Sunday. So maybe make them shoot threes. As weird as that sounds, make them shoot somewhat more contested threes than give them easy mid-range jumpers. And that's your and then get those rebounds. Obviously, rebounding is vital against anyone, but also against the Suns team when the Wolves should have a size advantage. Get those rebounds, secure the rebounds, get out and run in transition, and try and build a lead that way. That's the way the Wolves will have to approach this game. All right, we'll do the live postcast. It'll be, TNT games are long, 11:45-ish, maybe even midnight, late Tuesday into Wednesday. Following the game, we'll do a full post-game pod that'll post early Wednesday morning following Wolves Suns, and then we'll break it all down the rest of this week. We'll preview the Bucks game on Friday, and we'll do all this stuff again Friday night, the live postcast and the whole thing. So a big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. It's greatly appreciated. A reminder, you can watch on YouTube. You can listen on any of your favorite audio platforms. You can also download the new Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku or Amazon Fire TV and listen to all your favorite Locked On Sports Minnesota shows. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken, and that's with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Thanks again for making us your first listen, and a reminder that you can now make your second listen the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.